الحمد لله العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. So we come to that place where we discuss the sort of psychological states that are required as a perpetual state within the wayfarer in order to meet with God or in order to allow the light of God and godliness to emerge within the or from the limitations of our individuality. Now, as we go into this, we need to remind ourselves the nature of this world and the nature of this life, that they are not the beginning of our existence, and neither are they permanent. And additionally, they are very short lived, that we are from another place. And when we go back to that place, the 70 years of this life may appear like an hour, as the Quran states, not necessarily in comparison to the length of that day, but because we will at that point have a different perspective on time, and we will see that actually, as we can, within the state of sleep, have a dream that seems like an unending dream. But when we wake up and we realize that we have only slept for an hour, but we dreamt a dream that felt days long or even longer. So we will get a different perspective on this life at that point. But here we need to remind ourselves that that is the more accurate perspective on this life. It's a very short lived life. The other thing we need to remind ourselves is that we are here on a task. That task is not to do with the world or the body or the bodily. The task is an inner task of us awakening to the truth and emerging within that beautiful truth. Now, the reason why we need to be mindful of this is because in this bodily state, we become overly occupied with the body and the properties of the body. The challenges of life are mere challenges, and we need to understand them well and grow through them to refine the inner being, as I will explain shortly. But instead, what happens because we are mindless of our own reality is that we become preoccupied excessively with the properties of the body and the bodily, the psychological states that result through human interaction and bodily challenges become a point of great turbulence and turmoil within us. But if we can constantly remind ourselves that we are not the body, nor the psychological states that are generated through bodily trials and interactions, but we are another reality altogether, then in that case, we would live a very beneficial and a profitable life. So we can lose sleep over the apprehension of loss, loss of our businesses or the collapse of our business empire, loss of prestige, loss of a loved one. And we can spend countless nights worrying and not sleeping and ruining our health. Or on the other hand, we can remind ourselves that this is a state that is extraneous to me in my reality. It is a state of the body. I have to learn something through it and move on. Or we can stay embedded within that turbulent state, and until it fades away, we ruin our opportunity time, health, and other personal relations with other creatures of God because we become pretty much useless. We can either face difficulties and lament and say, "Why me?" or cry and try and explain to people that I am the oppressed one. Or we can say to ourselves, well, these are the challenges that I sought after in a life prior to this. I have been given these challenges as unique opportunities to grow through. If we can have that attitude, then we will learn what we have to learn through those challenges and lead a meaningful life. So, for example, many people find that they are in relationships or situations that are unbearable. Now, if they were to change their perspective on the matter, they might find it a very interesting task to go through those relationships. If we say that this is actually a game and this person has chosen to be difficult in this life with me as a part of an agreement that we have made, and I have to learn how to deal with it, then what happens is that the inner being is neutralized, is at ease, and the outer being is encountering a difficult situation, which the outer being sees as a task and as a bodily challenge, which is not real, which is not permanent, which is momentary. Of course, the moment is a lengthy one. It transpires in the form of days and months and weeks and years. But nonetheless, the inner being knows it is not real in the realest sense. Now, if I can hold myself together and be with this difficult person or in this difficult relationship or in this difficult challenge and learn through it, then I have achieved my purpose. If we can change our perspective and remind ourselves of our reality, then we can begin to lead meaningful lives. Now, there's a verse in the Quran which states that no tribulation befalls upon you within the earth or in your own souls, but that it has already been prescribed within a book prior to the creation of the heavens and the earth and prior to the initiation of your existence. Now, the reason for this is, the Quran reminds us, so that you may not be overly joyed at what comes to you, and you may not be overly grieved at what leaves you. Now, look at the verse properly, that trials and tribulations are prescribed. You are going to encounter them. But your central task is not to internalize them. You are supposed to be in a state of neutrality within. If you internalize with that situation and interact with it in a manner in which you feel it's real, then it will affect you in a way that it will bring joy and grief. When it brings joy and grief to you, you are actually replacing your reality with a psychological state generated through bodily encounter, and that is not you. Internally, you're supposed to be in a state of neutrality so that you learn from these experiences and you emerge through them and you grow through them. So, a person who is sworn at, cursed at, whose money and wealth leaves him or her, if internally they are unmoved by it, then they become bigger than artificial prestige. They become greater than worldly wealth. They become greater than praise and curses. And that is the whole idea behind wayfaring. Tawakkul means to rely upon God for the ultimate outcome within every affair. Allah says in the Quran, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And that is the chapter we want to deal with at present. He who relies upon Allah or leaves things upon Allah, then Allah is sufficient for him. What this does not mean is that we become passive and inactive. It means that we are very active in trying to attain what is best for us and for our humanity for the sake of God. But we should not be overly concerned with the outcome and the result. The result is left to God. With this understanding that I am on a singular or unidirectional journey to meet with my God, and the meeting with God is to allow God to emerge through me. And that is the surest of meeting, not in the hereafter, but me relenting and allowing God to prevail. That is my singular task here. I will strive for it. And then at every point, I will rely upon God for its outcome, and I will be pleased with his outcome. Now, here we need to remind ourselves that if indeed God is my objective, and if indeed he is most capable, and if he indeed loves me more than I love myself, if he is the caring parent, and if he is the intimate companion, and if he knows what is better for me than I know myself, and if he is more eager to meet with me than I am to meet with him, then in that case I can rely upon him and I can trust in him, especially when he says, indeed, the one who relies upon God, then God is sufficient for him. What this means is that we optimally work in this worldly life of ours to obviously earn our livelihood, to produce in the best possible manner in accordance with the abilities God has given us, to help others. And through the whole of this process, to refine our souls into becoming charitable, altruistic, kind, genuine, caring creatures. But in that process, as a part of our human condition, we will also yearn for success. We will also yearn for appreciation. We will also yearn for outcome and the fruits of our labor in the way that our human bodily condition dictates. That part of it will go wrong inevitably because God has the ultimate plan of purging us from false expectations and bringing us to Him to the loftiest pedestal of our existence, where we are beyond the world. In fact, we are the authors of the world. And He wants to take us in that direction. That rather than you being caused joy at seeing the produce of your labor, why don't you come to that pedestal when you can initiate the earth and humanity afresh at will if you want to? So, at that level, we are still plagued by wanting to see the results of our labors. This is where we need to leave things to Allah because things will go wrong. So now, we will offer all good gestures to our loved ones, but our loved ones will not reciprocate in a like manner, nor will they appreciate us enough. We will put in a lot of effort with the expectation for it to be reciprocated, to be appreciated. But the reciprocation is not there, appreciation is not there. At that point, then we are caused pain with it. That is the time to leave it to God, the outcome. To say, God, you know best. This is the most appropriate outcome that needs to be appreciated by me from your perspective. Or at times, we have built, let us say, a wonderful business empire, but it's going to collapse. We have been striving all our lives, doing the right thing, but the fruits of our labor are going to be snatched away from us, and there's nothing we can do. At that point, we will get frustrated and we will say, God, you know best. And sleep at night will go. Nothing of us will remain intact. This is the point, to leave it to God. and remind ourselves of the words of our beloved Imam Hussain, in which he says, "Oh Allah," and I repeat this often, that when you have formed me within the womb of my mother in a state when I had no control whatsoever, and when you fed me from the bosom of my mother, when I was in utmost need and could not understand how to fulfill my need, but you had already catered for my need when I was unable to think for myself. O Lord, the one who has taken care of me so well in my yesterday, shall you abandon me in my tomorrow if it were to come and if you have destined it for me? Remind ourselves of this, that if the business empire collapses, the one who holds the reins of the universe that we see above us and the universes that we cannot see, the one who holds the reins of all these worlds in his right hand, shall he abandon me, a creature that requires nothing but a morsel, if my tomorrow were to come? When we remind ourselves of these things, however, as we will discuss in future talks, when we begin to trust God, the initial stage is to blindly trust in God. Yes, I trust God, and His discretion is final and it's best for me. But in there is still heaviness. That heaviness in itself is an obstacle, an impediment from us seeing the light of God. With time, even this heaviness, a begrudging state, needs to relent, needs to give way, where we become neutral in accepting the decree of God. Beyond neutrality, as we will explain in future talks, comes a state of utmost psychological and spiritual pleasure that, oh Allah, you have chosen this for me. This sickness that I'm encountering, this lack of appreciation that I'm encountering, the swearing, cursing, enmities, blames, accusation, what I'm encountering, the collapse of my business empire and me being reduced to rags. Oh Lord, how can I thank you that you have seen me worthy of your own beautiful self and your discretion. That's where we need to reach to, and obviously we will explain this. We turn to the story of Imam Hussain, just a portion of it. And in that story of Hussain, we are seeing that everything is being snatched from him. And as the day continues, and as the tribulations intensify, and as everything is snatched away from him, and as he is deprived of one and all, we have testimonies from his adversaries that he shone and radiated with serenity and tranquility, to the extent that we have not seen a person so brutally oppressed, both physically and psychologically, arrive to a state where he radiates with such beauty and such serenity prevails upon his being, that the thought of putting him to death was removed from our minds, and we were immersed in observing the divine beauty that radiated from him.